All right. Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of the Skift podcast. My name is Seth Borko. I'm a senior research analyst at Skift Research, and I'm joined by Dennis Shaw, the founder and editor of Skift. Now, Dennis, we are both big TripAdvisor fans. We cover the company a lot, and they just had some major news on their Q4 earnings call. Dennis, I know you wrote a story about it. Why don't you kick us off and tell us what's going on?
Yeah, so they actually signaled that they're going to do something like this in November when they said they were looking for options about how to better monetize or get better shareholder value for both Viator and The Fork, which is the dining reservations platform. So TripAdvisor announced this week that, that it filed an S1 statement with the SEC to take Viator public. And the way it would work is TripAdvisor would maintain control of Viator, but Viator would become a public company. And the reason it wants to do this is A, to increase shareholder value, and B, it's still, and B, because it doesn't feel like, Viator has a different business model and the fork than the rest of TripAdvisor. It's more transactional than advertising. So it wants to give greater visibility into the worth of the company. And at the same time, it's conducting parallel talks with third parties about other options.
Yeah.
So, Seth, go ahead.
Well, I was just gonna say, yeah. So, like that, just to sum it up, it's basically started in the process of sort of spinning off. It's got this segment that they call their experiences in dining. It's like you said, Viator, which is this, day tours and experiences online travel agency, and the Fork, which is kind of like they would hate for this. They would hate that I use this comparison, but kind of like the Open Table of Europe. And it's been the growth engine of the company. And now that they're considering, maybe we can kind of monetize this or spin it off a little bit. It's interesting to me that they're considering doing this. I know they forecasted it. Do you think it's? I'll give you my thoughts. I want to ask you if you think this is a good idea.
Yeah, I think it's a good idea.
You do.
Certainly,
Interesting. All
see,
right, this is a kind of a debate because I'm not sure it's like the smartest idea. I don't know if I love it.
okay. Um, I mean, certainly there's a lot of shareholder value in Viator that is not being achieved. That's for sure. But what I'm questioning is TripAdvisor. They're saying that they have a two-pronged strategy.
Yeah.
Viator will be the standalone, sell tours and activities as a standalone business, and TripAdvisor will sell tours and activities as part of a trip, like an OTA. And I don't really have it. There's been such brand confusion about Viator. TripAdvisor has emphasized the TripAdvisor brand for tours and activities at various times over Viator. And I don't really have any confidence that TripAdvisor can do this integrated strategy and sell tours and activities successfully as part of an overall trip strategy.
Interesting. That's a more fundamental question for the whole thing. I mean, I think they've done a pretty nice job of keeping Viator independent, right? They acquired Viator. I think it was 200 million. Do you remember exactly when they acquired it? It was a while
It
ago now.
was 2014 for 200 million.
2014 for 200 million. So we're coming out 8 years, nearly a decade of Viator. They've kept it mostly independent, and I think they even said that even to this day, the majority of Viator's bookings come through Viator.com, not through TripAdvisor.com. So I think you are spot on that they have struggled to, or my opinion is they've kind of struggled to integrate. When you book an experience on TripAdvisor, it's not entirely clear that you're always booking through Viator. It's not even necessarily clear that TripAdvisor will book you experiences, but there is a synergy there that I like because TripAdvisor has so many more experience listings because they have all the user generated content and the reviews. And so TripAdvisor will have usually every experience in a destination, but not every experience will be bookable via Viator. So I definitely think that
Right.
causes some confusion there, but I think there's a nice synergy to having Viator as part of the TripAdvisor larger brand. Although I guess that's probably one of the things we should talk about is they've called this potentially a sub IPO, meaning that TripAdvisor had, we don't have any details yet, but speculating that TripAdvisor might retain a large portion, if not even majority control of of Viator even after the IPO spin out. So maybe they're not going to be fully disentangled. I don't know. It's an interesting thing to think about.
Yeah, I think they said that they want to maintain control of a Viator, that it's a strategic asset, you know.
Well,
But
look, it's also their main growth driver, right, Dennis? It's like
mhm.
it's for years now. TripAdvisor has been talking about one, they want to diversify away from pure meta search because Google is pressuring that business, and two, they want to show positive growth. And the way they've been diversifying and growing has been this experiences and dining segment. And so that's what I was alluding to earlier, where I was a little surprised. I mean, I know they foreshadowed it, but I was a little surprised that they want to spin it off. I guess you are correct. You're taking the executive role here, Dennis, where it's about unlocking shareholder value that's not being recognized. But I'm a little surprised to see them taking this piece that has been accomplishing these two strategic goals of growth and diversification and kind of putting it into its own little box.
Well, let's talk about this piece because they also announced that at the same time that they filed to take Viator public, they're also pursuing parallel discussions with third parties. So, what kind of other options does TripAdvisor have for Viator? Could they possibly partner or sell it or and maintain some kind of interest in it?
Well,
Could they in some, yeah,
the obvious sale is private equity, right? I mean, like I think that must be what they're referring to when they say we're looking to IPO the company, but also will entertain other options, other offers. What they're basically saying is hey, if you're a private equity company with a pretty big war chest, we'd like to talk to you. Reach out, right? That's a for sale. That's like putting a for sale sign in your front yard. So I think that's clearly the other option. And there is some very large institutional PE and also venture capital interest in the space. We haven't discussed their competitors much, but Get Your Guide and Klook are probably the two largest competitors in the day tour space. By the way, so is Expedia. Expedia does have a tours and activities business, and any of those would be really, certainly a private equity company could buy, or a competitor would be really happy to buy Viator and merge it into their business. It would probably double them in size overnight.
I think people have talked about this, and it's unlikely that SoftBank, which is an investor in Get Your Guide and Klook, could buy Viator and combine the three companies. I don't think that's going to happen. But I wonder, do you think there's any potential for some kind of Expedia partnership with TripAdvisor in tours and activities? Because like you said, TripAdvisor is big in tours and activities. They have a history together. Expedia supplies a lot of inventory, vacation rental inventory uh, to TripAdvisor. Do you think there's any potential there?
I mean, in like a world where we're just gaming. If I was let me put it this way: if I was an investment banker who was covering Expedia, I would pitch Expedia the deal, right? I'd say, hey, let's try it. If I was Expedia, would I accept that pitch? I don't know if I would. I mean, we talked about this too, Dennis, and you covered this a lot. I think Expedia is just kind of they're selling off a lot of their discretion, their ancillary businesses, right? Didn't they just sold Agencia? They're kind of getting back to their core about kind of just hitting singles and doubles and doing a really good job of it is how I see it. And so for them to then go out and make a major M&A, because this would be a very big deal. They have close ties in the past. TripAdvisor is an Expedia spinoff. And by
Right.
the way, I was going to say, when we talk about these sub IPOs, the only major example that comes to mind is the Trivago Expedia sub IPO. So they have similar philosophies, similar management, lots of historical ties. So I think you can convince yourself it makes sense, but I'm not sure I actually see Pete Kern doing that.
You're totally right that it goes totally against the grain of what Expedia is trying to do right now, simplify the company. It would be a complex acquisition. But where do you think, I know you have some data, where do
Yeah.
you think Viator stands these days in relation to Get Your Guide and Klook? Because I feel like TripAdvisor has, in some ways, squandered Viator's position. It was, the unquestioned market leader years ago. Um, there have been a lot of things happening, not all TripAdvisor's fault, market forces and everything. But what do you see as Viator's position these days?
Yeah, so we did a deep dive into TripAdvisor in September of 2020. So it's still things changed a lot in the last year, but it was still during the pandemic, so it's still somewhat relevant. And we counted up how many listings all of the major tours and activities platforms had. We had Viator. We counted just shy of 400,000 listings, 395,000 listings. Expedia, we counted 210,000 listings. Get Your Guide, 60,000, and then Airbnb, 30,000. Actually, Klook, it was hard for us to tell exactly, but we think they're around the same level as Airbnb, kind of in that 30,000 range. Um, and so what that means is that Viator is the largest online travel agency in the tours and activities space, the day tour space, which means it's a huge deal. This is a fast growing market. It's one of the largest markets that's still mostly offline. The switch to online is happening quickly. Only more dramatic switch to online because of the pandemic. And they have number one, effectively, market share, especially in terms of suppliers and listings. And as we all know, one of the hardest things about building an online travel agency is getting suppliers. So it's a real crown jewel asset. It's a real powerful asset.
Mhm.
But
One thing, go
but
ahead. I'm sorry.
well, I don't want to stop me from rambling if I am. But I agree with you about squandering the lead a little bit. We also did this proprietary analysis to Skift where we counted up how many listings each site had in like the 100 most popular vacation destinations in the world. And we've done this a couple times now. And when we did it for the first time in 2018, if you just looked at just the top 100 destinations, what we found was Viator had 4 times the listings of its next closest rival. Today, it has just 25% more inventory than its next closest rival. And so it's this two-pronged thing. One, they are the largest, they are the crown jewel, they have the most suppliers. But just in 2018, just a couple of years ago, they were standing heads and shoulders above all of their peers. And today it's a much, much, much tighter race. So maybe a little bit of tortoise and hare there where you think you've got this huge lead to start, but if you nap for a year or two, you just take a quick break, you will be shocked at how quickly your competitors catch up to you. And they're very, by the way, speaking of capitalization, they're all very well funded, right? Get Your Guide just raised more debt. Klook just raised more equity. And so the idea that Viator is going out to raise some capital to fuel growth is not crazy.
Right. So, Seth, I wrote that the TripAdvisor's Q4 earnings call yesterday seemed like a sales pitch for Viator. And one of the things the CFO said is TripAdvisor has said this repeatedly over the years that their tours and activities business has similar margins to what uh, OTAs get when they sell hotels. He made that comparison. And
Hmm.
then also he said TripAdvisor in 2021 has taken share in the US domestic market where it hasn't been strong in the past. It's mostly been strong in English speaking countries, in cities. So why hasn't um, TripAdvisor been it? First of all, do you think that's true about the hotel like margins? And also, why hasn't or isn't it a failure of Viator that it hasn't been able to get more global than it is?
Well, um, all right, you asked me a couple questions there. I'm going to try and disentangle a bunch of them, right? First is about the margins of the experiences business. And the answer there is like a half and half, right? My understanding is that they can earn hotel like margins. That is correct on a percentage term, which is important, right? I think I'm just trying to pull up some numbers. I mean, historically, this segment has managed to earn. Let's see. I mean, pre-COVID, they were able to earn some pretty good margins. We believe it's something like a 20% commission on average, and we've seen that borne out in the actual data. You know, for
It's a
it's
lower, it's a much lower price tag. You said, percentage wise,
yeah,
but
yeah,
tours
you've
are a
got it
lot cheaper
exactly
there.
right. What I was alluding to, which is that the margins can be hotel like, by which we mean 10 to 20%, kind of 15% midpoint, but on a hotel, you're booking usually multiple nights, usually at several $100s a night. And so, a 10% commission of a $400 ticket or a $500 ticket is a lot more dollars than a 20% commission of a tour for 40 bucks, right? So
Right.
even though the dollar margins can be similar, you need to pump a lot more volume through the system to make similar EBITDA. Um, then you asked about expanding internationally. I think you might have been a little mean here, Dennis, calling it a failure to expand internationally. I mean, I think everyone expands to struggle expand into a market where you don't speak the language, and even to any foreign market is incredibly difficult, especially in the travel
Mhm.
industry. We've seen Expedia struggle to do it. We've seen Booking struggle to do it. We've seen Trip.com struggle to do it. I mean, that's just the reality of this game. That's why in the hotel space you have guys like Traveloka or Despegar or Make My Trip who succeed precisely because they speak the language both literally and metaphorically, right? So I don't know if I would call that a failure. It's an opportunity, and it's going to be tough. It's a tough nut to crack, though.
Seth, the elephant in the room is that all this is taking place while TripAdvisor is looking for a new CEO. Steve Kaufer, who's been CEO for the company for like 22 years, is leaving. So it'll be up to the new CEO to figure all this out. And one thing that you know they also talked about their corporate strategy this week, and they still really haven't figured out anything for TripAdvisor Plus. So um, all this occurs in the context of a leadership void and a further grappling for a viable strategy for TripAdvisor going forward.
I mean, yes, I I agree with you entirely, Dennis. Right? I mean, we've this is something that we've discussed in the past about how. I think you have some strong thoughts on this, Dennis. You can keep going. I've talked enough on this podcast, perhaps, but like it does feel like they sometimes this TripAdvisor sometimes can get they're going to hate me for saying this, but they can get a little distracted by this shiny new thing, so to speak, right? I do feel like they definitely go, well, we've got this great metasearch business, then metasearch starts to slow, and they're like, well, we'll do this great B2B business, and then we'll buy these experiences businesses, and then we'll launch a subscription B2C product. I think they're all really good ideas, and I think they can all be executed well. I think that the company has they would obviously disagree, but I think they've struggled to integrate all of those. And now they've got kind of these little, I would like little bits and pieces of these really potentially really powerful businesses. And I think they need to decide which ones to really nurture. And that's a fundamental key question for the future of this business. I would agree, and it's going to be up to the next CEO ultimately, right, to decide, do we want to be a more focused business, or if we're really going to commit to all these different lines of businesses, how are we going to raise the capital to do that and to invest in that? Which, by the way, the sub IPO might play perfectly into that and say, let's raise some money from some investors, and we'll use that money to fund the Viator expansion. Then we'll use the internal cash flow to fund the TripAdvisor Plus expansion, right? Maybe that's the strategy. But the disparate parts of this business can be both a potential advantage, but I also think it can be a bit distracting sometimes.
Seth, we're out of time. Great thoughts, great conversation. It's clear to me that the focus going forward with Viator is just to make sure that it maintains its status as a shiny new thing and a growth engine for the company.
Yep, agreed, Dennis. Great chatting with you as always. I can't wait to see what happens going forward. It's exciting times for this business. I'm excited to see Viator and TripAdvisor's future. Should be good.
Ditto.